Thank you very, very much for the opportunity to speak to you today on this topic of regenerating nature, and I'll be talking about the city context in particular. And I too would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land, the Wurundjeri Wurrung people, and pay my deepest respects to elders past and present. And of course this idea, as Paul mentioned, of regenerating nature in cities is a huge opportunity to celebrate Indigenous culture. And we can do this in many ways. We can do this through the choice of plants that we have in our gardens, in our streetscapes, in our parks. There are over 700 locally native species, plant species in Melbourne, many of which are deeply important culturally, have food values, fibre, medicine values. We can do it through the choice of animals that we seek to bring back into our city. There's a fabulous butterfly called the common brown butterfly, which is unfortunately named because it's not common and it's not actually brown. But it once used to emerge in huge numbers at the start of one of the 7 Wurundjeri seasons. I personally think it'd be a wonderful story to bring back to Melbourne, that we're connecting culture and nature in the middle of our city. We can also do it through building opportunities for First Nations people in the implementation of urban nature, in the design of urban nature, and the governance of urban nature. But as well as providing, that cultural connection and that really important sense of place, nature can also help us tackle some of the really unprecedented challenges that we are facing in cities. Extreme weather events, pandemics. We've got a mental well-being and loneliness crisis in cities, exponential population growth. These are all things that we're scrambling to try and find solutions for. And we know that through nature we can cool a city by about 8 degrees overnight in heat waves. We can try and minimise some of the more extreme events of storms and other climate change related events. And we can deliver a truly remarkable array of health and well-being benefits. If you're lucky enough to live in a street with more biodiversity, you'll sleep better at night. You'll have a lower probability of suffering from mental well-being issues. You'll actually have less likelihood of developing, diabetes and cancer and heart disease. These are well-evidenced benefits of urban nature. If your child is lucky enough to play in a schoolyard with more biodiversity, they'll have improved cognitive development and lower rates of behavioural issues. I mean, just imagine the benefits to the Victorian economy if every Victorian had access to those kinds of opportunities. The economic benefits extend well beyond just our health and well-being. Having nature in retail strips actually increases foot traffic, well evidenced, so that people buy, there are more people buying more stuff, which apparently is a good thing. CBD buildings with vegetation, with rooftop gardens, courtyards, vegetation on the sides of buildings, they have increased occupancy rates and more consistent occupancy rates. We also know that we can enable threatened species to thrive and survive in our cities, and we can re-enchant people with the very idea of nature again. So for all of these reasons, nature has become a central part of the discussion about the future of livable cities. But you can actually fill a city with trees and have little benefit for biodiversity. Think about the boulevard of plane trees, which we all love. It's essentially a biological desert. And that's a pity because many of the benefits I've described are linked to biodiversity, not just green. But it's also a pity because cities have actually got a really important role to play in helping with the biodiversity extinction crisis. Cities are biodiversity hotspots. There are 3 times the number of threatened species per unit area in and around our cities as there are in their rural counterparts, including these 39 species that only occur in cities, like the Frankston spider orchid, and many others that sometimes increasingly are using cities for habitat because it's being degraded or destroyed elsewhere in their range. Australia, we need to also remember that Australia is one of the most important places in the world for biodiversity. We're a mega diverse nation, we're a wealthy nation, and most of our species are found nowhere else on the planet. And yet we know that we're also leading the world in terms of biodiversity extinction. There are now more than 2,200 species listed as being on the edge of extinction under our EPBC Act. Many of those common species, like gang cockatoos and bogong moths that once used to plaster the windows of Canberra Parliament House. I think we do need to increasingly see cities as a place for actually helping solve the biodiversity extinction crisis. Step one, of course, is to protect what you have. And unfortunately, we're seeing a lot of cities around Australia growing into areas that have some of our most critically endangered ecosystems. In Melbourne, we have the basalt plains grassland. There's less than 1% of it left. It's riddled with threatened species, and yet it's where we continue to grow our housing. Yes, we know we need more homes. That's absolutely a no-brainer. But we also know that we can do it without sort of being at the expense of threatened species and ecosystems. And that's why at the Biodiversity Council, where I'm a lead councillor, we've established a nature pledge for developers and for investors to grow homes and also grow nature at the same time, rather than actually destroying threatened species habitat when we're developing homes. But being regenerative for nature is more than just protecting the golden bits that we have left. It's about working out how we build nature back into the urban fabric. And that's why we designed this idea called biodiversity sensitive urban design. It's a process, a scientifically driven process for thinking really carefully about how you allow plants and animals to thrive in the places where we all live, work and play. And so it's a process of thinking through what it is that you want to achieve. So, for example, you might want to have fairy wrens back in your neighbourhood. Wouldn't that be lovely? Once you've got your set of objectives, thinking about how you actually deliver the resources that they're going to need. For fairy wrens, we're going to need to have water sources. We're going to need to have mid-story, that shrub layer that we're often missing in our gardens, in our parks, in our streetscapes. We're going to need to think through the threats that might prevent them from being there. So they're going to be cars, for example. Can we have traffic calming measures? Cats, keeping cats indoors. There are good design solutions for all of these things. We need to think about connectivity. How are the fairy wrens going to get to your neighbourhood? So we need to think about the landscape of Melbourne, our major cities, and think about how animals move around them and can start to recolonise new parts of the city. But it's also about thinking really carefully about how we do this so that people have positive interactions with nature. Yes, it's about designing our cities to be beautiful and enchanting, but we might also need some signs to let people know what we're doing. We might need some programs like citizen science to help people, to engage people in this process of regeneration. So we're working with some innovative developers and government agencies and green building certifiers in Australia and globally to try and demonstrate that this is not only possible and feasible, but it's also completely desirable and it's enchanting. It's healthy for biodiversity and for people. Thank you very much.